Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the hidden histories and secret fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite TV shows, movies, music, and more. We're your two Fujis of facts. I don't think I can say that anymore. Because it's refugees, right?
Oh, that's what that means? I didn't know that. Oh, wow.
We're the whitest guys in the room. I'm Alex Heigl.
I'm Jordan Runtagh.
And Jordan? Today we're talking about one of the lodestars of hip-hop's late 90s imperial era, a masterpiece that's one of the last genuine pieces of monoculture from the pre-aughts. Turns 25 this week? Last week? Whatever. We're in the ballpark.
This week, yeah.
The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. I remember this album being everywhere. I remember that cover art. I could probably draw it from memory. We were just talking before we started about the doo-wop video that I used to see all the time on, I guess this would have been The Box and maybe MTV, because I didn't watch a ton of... Yeah, because I didn't have the patience for MTV, which had non-music on it. But The Box was just videos. Miseducation is a great document of the times. It's a great snapshot, but it's also just like... I don't know if it can genuinely be called auteurist based on some of the controversies that we're talking about, but Hill was definitely a real talent. Still is, probably, but we don't have that much evidence. Well, she was a real talent around this time. Tom Bryant wrote at Stereo Gum, she's generally remembered as one of the greatest rappers and singers of an era when singers didn't really rap and rappers didn't really sing. And the record is this great multi-genre mix of it's I really like the neo soul from around this era. Like one of my favorite records is D'Angelo Voodoo, and I like a lot of the Soulquarian stuff, and this has some of that in there, but it's also, parts of it were recorded in Bob Marley's studio in Jamaica, and so there's this heady mix of almost every genre of black music in there. And she was 23.
Brian Wilson was that age when he made Pet Sounds.
Yeah, and it cost both of them everything. And it was a huge hit, which we'll get to in a bit. Jordan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of embarrassed to tell you that I came to this pretty late, so it's not etched in my synapses the way it should be for most people in my age group. Allow me to cite my oft-expressed excuse, which is that I really didn't engage with a lot of contemporary pop music when I was a kid. This was my Beatles and Malt Shop memories era, which is ironic considering the song Doo-Wop That Thing, but I probably heard of that song, listened to it, realized it was not actually a doo-wop song, and then got mad and refused to listen to any more. I didn't really glom on to this, and I think by the time I became aware of her in a serious way, it was mostly as a tabloid story when I first started my career as an entertainment journalist, and that would have been in the early 2010s when she was going through her tax evasion stuff. I must have seen, I have this memory of her, I think in like a Guinness Book of World Records, like the picture of her at the Grammys with an arm full of statues.
Yeah.
She became, I think, the first woman to win 5 Grammys in one night. But my impression of her until very recently, again, I'm ashamed to say this, wasn't as much that she was a major musical force, but she was an artist who had a big record and then never came back. And was like almost in the one-hit wonder territory, which is obviously an extremely unfair characterization of her career. It really wasn't until fairly recently that I went deeper. I am a huge Amy Winehouse fan. And I think it was when the documentary Amy came out in 2015, they had a lot of deep cuts on the soundtrack, and there was a cover of Amy doing Doo-Wop That Thing, which makes total sense. You could really tell that that's totally Amy's vibe. And that sent me back to this record, and I realized just how incredible it was and just how wrong I was.
Well, from the debate over the proper credit for the album's songs, to how the stress of creating and then living up to the masterpiece ultimately led Hill to retreat from public life, to the long shadow it casts on... Actually, I realized I didn't really get to that last part. To a third bullet point that I'll decide on later. Here's everything you didn't know about the miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Lauryn was born in Newark, New Jersey, and she grew up middle class in suburban South Orange, New Jersey. which I believe she may still live there to this day. And I think she was definitely living there for a while, if she doesn't still. Both her parents were amateur musicians. She grew up listening to her mom's soul records, and fittingly, she had a defining moment of her teen life when, at the age of 13, she got booked to sing at the famous Amateur Night at the Apollo.
I'm wincing as you say that because it is brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, she's fine, but the crowd is famously harsh.
That's the bit. She sang Who's Lovin' You, which was a 1960 single Smokey Robinson wrote for the Miracles. And like at the performance, like she's not bad by any stretch.
No.
She was just like, her voice wavers just a little bit and the crowd immediately comes for her.
Because she's obviously nervous. That's the thing that I think is just inexcusable, is that she's clearly very good but nervous. And instead of being a generous audience, they just come for her.
The 13-year-old girl who dared to get up on stage.
Dared to dream.
Yeah. And but so she soldiers on. The hook doesn't come out. You know, that's the whole bit at the Apollo. They bring out the hook.
The executioner.
Yes.
So they come. I don't think it's a hook. I think it's because that's the Gong Show. I think it's a guy with a broom who would chase people off the stage as if they were like woodland creatures on a back porch or something. The guy who did that was one guy's job. He was a vaudeville tap dancer named Sandman Sims, and he did that role from the 50s until 2000. For half a century, he crushed hopefuls' dreams on the stage at the Apollo as his professional gig. And then there was also, I don't know if this was reserved for people who were especially bad or just if Sandman Sims had the night off or what, but I guess there was another guy who would chase off people who were getting booed with a cap gun to the sound of a siren that they would play over the sound system. So that's nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, another person who bombed, another future celebrity who bombed at open mic night or amateur night at the Apollo was Luther Vandross, who appeared there 5 times and was booed off every single time. And then he went on to sing on Sesame Street before getting his big break, backing David Bowie on Young Americans. Jimi Hendrix, though, won first place at an amateur music contest at the Apollo in 1964. So they at least got that right. But yeah, we should punch in a clip from that performance Lauryn did because it's really great.
Treat you bad and wrong, my dear. And boy, since you went away, don't you know
It's interesting to me. I mean, Who's Lovin' You? I'm imagining she chose that song because there's almost as well known as the Smokey Robinson version is Michael Jackson's version when he was like, very early Jackson 5 days, probably like 9-10 years old. Yeah. So I wonder if that's like the official like preternaturally gifted
Motown
soul
anthem
singer anthem. Yeah. Wasn't Whitney Houston from Newark or South Orange rather?
Who?
I don't know. She's from Newark. Whitney Houston. Yeah. No. And
Jersey's got a lot of great. As far as musical states go, Jersey's got a lot of great claims to it,
Bruce.
Misfits.
Oh, yeah.
Whitney, Lauryn, Frank Sinatra.
Right. Yeah.
Most Italian guys from the Four Seasons. Bon Jovi.
Oh, I was going to say, is Frankie Valli there?
George Clinton, Debbie Harry, Patti Smith, Bill Evans, Donald Fagen. Like, it gets really crazy when you actually start to tally it up. Paul Simon.
No, Paul Simon.
Oh, no, he was a native of New York City, but he was born in Newark.
I didn't know that. Wow. I like to pretend that you're just doing this from memory right now.
No, I didn't think I could do that. No. It's funny when you get into like the really granular people like Blues Traveler and the Bouncing Souls.
I would have bet anything that Blues Traveler was from like North Carolina.
Yeah. Sarah Vaughan. That's crazy.
Ooh.
Count Basie. Yeah, man. Jersey. Who knew?
Sarah Vaughan the one who flipped the table on Aretha Franklin?
She sang from time to time. I know that for a fact. You drama monger. Get this back on
Sorry, I
track.
know.
Where the hell are we?
All right. Lauryn Hill was a straight-A student in high school, and she also ran track and field and was a cheerleader and was also elected homecoming queen. But the most defining moment of her teen life came in 9th grade when she teamed up with classmate Pras Michelle to form a rap group called Translator Crew with a Z, which also featured Pras' cousin Wyclef Jean, and together they became the Fugees. Wyclef was the only one of this threesome who was born in Haiti, though Pras' parents were also. And Wyclef and Lauryn Hill's on and off relationship would color a lot of what went into Miseducation, which we will get to in a bit.
Yeah, their relationship is bad. Messy on both ends. Anyway, it's a measure of Hill's talent that before she even graduated, she had the bones of a fairly promising acting career going. In 1991, she was MC Light's understudy in Club 12, which was an off-Broadway hip-hop reimagining of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, which sounds awful. Wyclef was also
with
there.
Lauryn Hill in it? Come on.
Well, she was an understudy. What did MC Light? I should know this off the top of my head. MC Light, Cha Cha Cha.
Yeah, this is when it becomes apparent that we do not have
Not
as a
hip-hop
richer
fans.
background in hip hop as we do in most areas of pop culture nerdery.
She also landed a role in the soap opera As the World Turns, and then in 1990,
That's bizarre.
and then in 1993, at 18, she made her big screen debut in your favorite sequel, Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit.
That was actually where I first encountered Lauryn Hill. That's true.
She's great in that movie. She had she could have been a real actress. Like, she had a real presence, and she's great. I think that actually may have been where I first saw her, and then was like, yeah, actually same. She also decided to go to Columbia for college while the Fugees were like blowing up with their 1996 sophomore album, The Score. Fuji La, the song where she sings the hook on, peaked at number 29 in the Hot 100, but the album eventually sold 7 million copies just in the U.S., mostly on the strength of their version of Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly, which you are about to ruin.
Yeah, but before I do, I'm going to ruin Columbia also. Art Garfunkel also went to Columbia just as his career in Simon & Garfunkel was taking off. I forget if he was studying architecture or mathematics. I think it was mathematics, but he wasn't so sure. I think he thought that the whole Simon & Garfunkel folk pop thing was going to be a flash in the pan, and he wanted to go study up and get his degrees. So he went to Columbia. One of the many ways that Art Garfunkel and Lauryn Hill are similar. But yes.
That was the worst thing you've ever said on this.
But yes, my little detour and Killing Me Softly with his song. It's written about your favorite and mine, Don McLean. Did you know that? Did we talk about this in the American Pie episode?
We must have
We
at
must
some
have blocked
point.
it out.
Yeah.
So the song was written when a 20-year-old singer-songwriter named Lori Lieberman saw Don McLean perform at LA's Troubadour Club, the very famous club, in 1971, and she really loved Don's song Empty Chairs. And she started scribbling notes on presumably like a beer coaster or something, or a napkin that very night for the lyrics that would become Killing Me Softly with his song. And the song was actually written by Norman Gimbel and Charles Fox. She was signed to a production deal to these two songwriters. And so she went uncredited for years as a co-writer on this song, and it became the source of a very ugly legal squabble. I guess she was signed to them, but she also started a romantic relationship with Gimbel. And then he apparently, according to Lori Lieberman, became abusive and their partnership crumbled. And so the songwriting duo would spend decades trying to minimize her role in this song that through the Fugees and Roberta Flack would sell a gazillion copies. That's a whole other episode, but I think she's finally credited now after many, many years. But Lori Lieberman, she was the first person to record this song in 1972, and it didn't do much on the charts. And then they tried to shop it around to other singers. Helen Reddy of I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar fame has said that she was sent the song, but she said the demo sat on my turntable for months without being played because I didn't like the title. That's true. It's kind of a weird title. Roberta Flack, who did, arguably the most iconic version to me, more so than the Fugees version. But then again, I would say that because I, in my mind, lived through the 70s. She first heard the song while on an airplane, while listening to like an in-flight music program. And she loved it so much, I think she didn't even know what the song was. She just wrote down the lyrics. And then as soon as she landed, I believe she called Quincy Jones, who she was acquainted with, and said, hum the song to him and said some of the words. Like, can you track this down for me in like your publishing contacts? I love this song. And she did. She recorded it, went to number one. And it was, how many years would it have been? About 20 years later, the Fugees did a version. It was recorded for their album, The Score. I think it was the last song recorded for that album after Pras made the suggestion to cover it. Anyway.
Wow.
Okay, man.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in 1997, Wyclef went solo with the double platinum The Carnival, thanks to the strength of Gone Till November. Great song. It was a bad time for the Fugees. Wyclef had always either forced himself into the spotlight. He used to do like backflips on stage and play guitar behind his head, or just force himself into the spotlight. And his relationship with Heigl, which had continued after Jean married designer Marie Claudette, was effectively destroying the group. Not that their relationship was really functional or fun at any point, as Wyclef wrote in his biography. We had fights on planes. We had huge fights, and a few times when it went down, she started swinging at me right there in the seats. People would scatter. We never got arrested, but we came close a few times in Europe. In his autobiography, Wyclef, who it's important to note defrauded an entire country with his Yele Haiti charity, which was launched after the wake of the 2010 earthquake and essentially served as a piggy bank for Wyclef and his cronies to just fly around and live large. He blames Lauryn Hill for breaking up the Fugees because this is where I say this gets really messy. At some point, Lauryn meets Bob Marley's son, Rohan, who's playing football for the University of Miami. And she gets pregnant with his child, but she lies to Jean and lets him think that the kid is his and plays up this ambiguity basically until the kid's born. And then when he found out, he wrote, in that moment, something died between us, which is sort of understandable. A friend told Torre for Rolling Stone in 2003, he wrote a great feature about kind of what happened. Honestly, she didn't even want the relationship with Rohan. Everyone was pushing her towards Marley to get her out of the other thing. They pushed her towards him like, why don't you give him a chance? Come on, go out on a date. Just do it. Not knowing this man had all this other baggage and drama in his life. That baggage turned out to be the fact that Rohan had gotten married in 1993 and had 2 children with a woman and was still married probably at the time he met Lauryn. I found a note on his Wikipedia that said he later produced divorce documents from Haiti, which is funny because that's not a country that we were talking about with regards to their relationship. You would assume he would maybe have gotten the papers in Jamaica or in the United States, but is Haitian divorce a thing?
Isn't that a Steely Dan song?
Huh.
I don't know what it says about.
Oh, it says this song refers to the alleged ease of divorce in Haiti. Okay, cool, man.
Royal scam.
All right, great.
An anonymous source told Rolling Stone, people don't know how calculating she can be. Lauryn used Roe to pull herself out of the relationship with Clef, and she happened to get pregnant. She hoped that the baby was Wyclef's because it would have forced his hand, but it wasn't. She would later have, according to my notes, 5 kids with Rohan Marley.
Yeah. Which is a kind of a shocking thing when you maybe didn't even really want to be in a relationship with the guy in the first place.
Yeah. Hill, for her part, told Trance magazine at the time, the Fugees was a conspiracy to control, to manipulate, and to encourage dependence. I took a lot of abuse that many people would not have taken in these circumstances.
Are the Fugees the most white collar crime band of all time?
They absolutely must be. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of...
Because Wyclef defrauded a charity, Lauryn went to jail for tax evasion, and I just found that this year, Praz was convicted of spearheading a multi-million-dollar political donation fund money shuffling campaign that involved a Malaysian fugitive named Zhou Lo. It's wild.
I think Rolling Stone had a big expose on that.
That's truly nothing nefarious. I mean, on the right side, I think some of the money was going to Barack Obama and some of it was going against Trump or whatever. Oh, sorry, we're not allowed to get political. But yeah, it wasn't like he was funding like coups in like Somalia or whatever, but still really wild. If you threw a dartboard at all the 1990s hip hop acts who you thought would commit this slew of crimes, would you have thought it would have been the Fugees? Yeah, tax evasion, charity defrauding, and international political money laundering. I would have bet on Drew Hill.
I wouldn't have expected TLC. Maybe Salt and Pepper. A friend, or I guess more of an acquaintance's mom, was Lauryn Hill's cellmate in prison.
Aw.
When she was in jail. Yeah, apparently she was very nice.
Yeah, I mean, she was there for like 3 months. It was not, she wasn't doing a hard time. Wyclef sounds like a piece of shit. I'm not going to lie. Torre had this thing in the Rolling Stone feature in 2003 where basically Praz talked about how when Wyclef was writing the Carnival, both Lauryn Hill and Praz were supportive of him, wanted him to branch out, and then when Hill started writing her own songs, Wyclef was like, I'm not gonna help you out with that stuff. Praz told Torre, I remember when Pepsi wanted her for a commercial and they were like, all we want is you. We don't know the other two cats. She said, without them, I'm not doing it. There's a lot of things she didn't do because of the group. Then when she goes to work on her music and she doesn't have the support, that can have an effect. Several quotes later, he calls Wyclef Jean a cancer, in case you needed a more forceful quote.
That's his cousin, right?
Yes?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, the man did defraud Haiti. While she was pregnant, Hill wrote and produced songs for women like Whitney Houston and Aretha Franklin, which is insane to think about. Aretha's 1998 single, A Rose is Still a Rose, that Hill produced, was peaked at number 28. Imagine you're like 20 and you're producing and writing for Aretha Franklin. That's wild. Rowan Marley and Lauryn Hill's son Zion was born in 1997, shortly after Hill dropped out of Columbia and turned 20. Lot happened to her in not very much time. She was feeling frustrated on multiple levels. People told her that having a child at this stage would be bad for her career, and she was also fed up with her label, who was balking at her desire to go solo like Wyclef. So she began the process of assembling a crew of musicians and got to work on what would become her defining artistic statement. She told Rolling Stone, "When I decided that I wanted to try a solo project, I was met with incredible resistance and discouragement from a number of places that should have been supportive. So that had a motivating factor. But it was less about proving myself and more about creating something I wanted to see and hear exist in the world." I think most of her emails, or most of her interviews since like the mid-2000s, have been email-based or like on Tumblr.
Interesting.
Because for that Torre feature, he was like, he called her for a quote, and he got this long thing that was like, Miss Hill does not do interviews that do not compensate her for her time and effort. And he like asked around, and another magazine had also been in contact with her, and she wanted 10 grand for the cover, which is, it's funny because like a lot of what she talks about makes sense, but in like a kind of like, that's just not how any of this works way, like she's arguably right that the music industry is disgusting and parasitic, and that like, doing interviews and stuff and like, and all this stuff is a big drain on time and resources. But like, That's just not the world. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. And she has chosen not to live in it. So
Yeah, which I mean, again, at least she stuck to her guns with that. Did you ever have an interview request ask for money?
No.
I did, and it was always with like the people who were close to the actual stars and not an actual famous person.
Oh,
a lot of people. I worked on a feature on Freddie Mercury, just digging into his life when Bohemian Rhapsody came out, and got some quotes from people like Brian May and like people who were actually close to him. But I was trying to get on more ancillary figures, and a lot of those types of figures were asking for money. And then I did a podcast about the life of David Bowie, and it was sort of the same deal. A lot of people who were kind of on the fringes of him, including people who claim to have had romantic relationships with him, were all asking for money, including his former wife.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the 90s stuff, like I'm sure like Inside Edition and some of the tabloids just kind of set that precedent in people's minds. But it's always like, legitimate places don't do that. Anyway, one of Miseducation's mixers and engineers was a guy named Gordon Williams with the charming nickname of Commissioner Gordon, which I, of course, love because it's a Batman reference. He was an A&R guy who'd come up through New York's hip-hop scene, and he told OK Player in 2021, "I met Lauryn when she was a member of the Translator crew. She asked me to work with her on the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill after a lot of bumping into one another at other people's sessions. We recorded in New York, Miami, and at Hope Road, or Tough Gong Studios in Jamaica. To be in Bob Marley's house created a landscape for magic. Stephen Marley was the one who invited us to come in, which is odd considering she had a kid with the non-Stephen Marley.
It's all family.
I had organized the equipment that had to be brought to Jamaica, and we had to make sure it could work as a museum when we weren't recording. They let Lauryn occupy the main studio. We were there for a couple weeks at a time across multiple sessions."
And Rich Nice, who was an A&R man at Columbia at the time, told OK Player, "Commissioner Gordon was in control of the studio. As a Trackmasters producer, I had a respected ear. She would ask me what I thought. She would give us 5 different versions of one song with other verses, differing hooks, and we'd love all 5. Lauryn always has her idea of what she wanted. It was never a scenario where she was lost or asked, 'What do I do?' And in an interview, Lauryn described the first day of recording by stating, 'The first day in the studio, I ordered every instrument I ever fell in love with. Harps, strings, timpani, organs, clarinets. It was my idea to record it so that the human element stayed in. I didn't want it to be too technically perfect.' I love that.
Yeah, she's talked about her liking older keyboards like Whirlies and electric pianos and Hammond organs that might not be perfectly in tune. She says she never uses compression on her voice, on her vocal tracks. Commissioner Gordon said that when James Poyser, who was at the time playing keys for D'Angelo, came in to play on the song Superstar, they rented a harpsichord that was so out of tune, or so old it fell out of tune so much that they had the tuner on hand. And by the time James finished playing it on a track, it was already out of tune. Just hilarious.
Can I ask you a mega nerd question?
Please.
How do electric pianos go out of tune?
Because the tines, so they're instead of strings like a piano, they're metallic tines, and because they're being struck repeatedly, they can get bent out of shape.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, the few ones that I've ever actually touched or like been in a studio with, I've gone in and immediately like wanted to sit down, and people have been like, "Please don't do that." Because apparently, like, people sit down at them unplugged and want to play them hard enough to actually like produce sound, and that's really bad for the tines. You always have to play them amplified. As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages. So we'll get into some of the higher profile musicians on the record, including one of my nemeses, but Carlos Santana.
Oh, yes.
But it's worth talking about the core of the studio musicians behind Miseducation because that's where one of its biggest controversies come from. They were a gang of musicians who Hill christened the New Ark, although they are by their own admission, were known for a while after this whole thing as the Lawsuit Guys. The four musicians who formed the studio band, Rashim Kilo Pugh, Vada Nobles, and the twin brothers Johari and Tejumold Newton, sued Lauryn Hill and the label Columbia when they were not credited as writers and producers. They eventually settled out of court for $5 million. Kilo Pugh brought his crew to Hill's house in Orange, New Jersey. Everyone hit it off initially. "She's really like a sister. If there was a female version of me, it would be her," Joe Newton told XXL Mag. I knew the family, her mother and father, brother, her man, her kid. We were extensions of her family." Hill brought the team into a studio that she had in the attic of the house where they began working on songs for Aretha Franklin, another singer named Andrea Martin, before starting work on Miseducation, either in the attic of this orange house or Manhattan studios. They were recording on 2-inch tape, trying to use as few loops as possible or samples. Commissioner Gordon told Rolling Stone, "In the beginning, the New Arc guys were the core who put the basic tracks together. Vader was a programmer who made drum beats. Kilo would write hooks and lyrics. Tejumold Newton played piano, and Joe Newton played guitar." Joe told XXL, "Lauryn was definitely the guide. It was her vision. Our job was to take whatever was in her head and put it down for her. This led to a collaborative way of writing, where a riff or sound would morph into an idea, then become a groove, and finally emerge as a song. Everybody had jobs," Pugh remembered. "Vada's job was to find the groove that made us hum. Then Tejumold, and Joe's job was the instrumentation to enhance that groove. When the groove was so catchy that it made us hum, either Lauryn or me, then it was time to create the words that she wanted to sing. It was literally constant work. Even when you didn't think you were working, you were working. The vibe was incredible. Much like the band, this informal division of labor, in which nothing was said on paper until it was too late, would come back to bite both Lauryn Hill and the New Arc."
The band came with her to Jamaica for a little over 2 weeks, according to Pugh, where they worked on Lost Ones, Doo-Wop That Thing, When It Hurts So Bad, and Forgive Them, Father. And there was a really cute moment, apparently on the record. Commissioner Gordon recalled, "Lost Ones was recorded the first day we were in Jamaica. I saw all those kids gathered around Lauryn, screaming and dancing. Lauryn was in the living room next to the studio with about 15 Marley grandchildren around her, the children of Ziggy, Stephen, and Julian, and she starts singing this rap verse, and all the kids start repeating the last word of each line, chiming in very spontaneously because they were so into the song." And it made it onto the record.
After Jamaica, things got messy. The Newton twins say that Nobles convinced them to sign a publishing deal with him, which they did, in the middle of making Miseducation. But at some point, Nobles was informed that Hill would be taking all the writing and production credits. He and Pugh were not happy about this and exited the project 6 months before it wrapped, while the Newtons stayed on to finish the album. But they were ultimately ensnared in the lawsuit after the release due to the deal that they signed with Nobles. Joe said, "We got dragged into a lawsuit we didn't even want to go into." And initially, this super backfired on these guys. Hill was basically hip-hop's golden child at the time. So a bunch of relatively unknown session musicians, all male, suing her was seen as an ugly move, and they said it had repercussions for them. Pugh was basically passed over for an opportunity to work with Missy Elliott, who was, as she still is, but extremely hot at the time, just because she found out that he had been involved in the lawsuit. Another of the album's producers, a guy named Che Vicious, told Rolling Stone that Hill might have faced pressure from the label to make herself seem en auteur. He said, she gave me co-production on To Zion, but I did the track on my own. There was label pressure to do the Prince thing, written and produced by. Once it became clear that I wouldn't be credited or compensated according to what's fair, I had to voice how I felt. I had a wife and family. She barely credited me. She gave Che my credits. As God is my witness, that was in spite. I tried my best to resolve it without lawyers, but it became impossible."
And all of this was reopened in very ugly fashion by jazz pianist Robert Glasper, who in 2018 went on a rant about Hill on a radio show in Houston. Asked a question about managing egotistical personalities, Glasper took aim squarely at Hill, bringing up moments from a gig he did with her in 2008, in which she frequently changed arrangements, demanded she be addressed as Ms. Hill, and never looked at directly in the eye, and she also threatened to cut the band's payment in half, presumably if any of these things were not abided by. In a 2003 feature on Lauryn Hill for Rolling Stone, a few people mentioned that when they asked her how much they would be paid for working on a record with her, she said, "Do it for God," i.e., do it for free. Glasper continued, "You've already stolen all my friends' music. Miseducation was by great musicians and producers that I know personally. You got a big handoff of music you didn't even write. Those songs were written by other people and they did not get their credit. She likes to take credit so she can become this super person. If you're a super person and you're that talented, do it. You feel me? She couldn't tune her guitar in rehearsal." And Lauryn was moved to respond to Glasper later that month, writing 3,000 words on medium.com. She said, "These are my songs. Musicians are brought in because of the masterful way they play their instruments. You may be able to make suggestions, but you can't write for me. I am the architect of my creative expression. No decisions are made without me. No matter how incredible the musicians who play with me are, my name is on the marquee. The expectation to make it all come together is on me. The risk and financial losses are on me."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. It's so ugly. You don't want to tar and feather people, especially women, but the evidence does not really look good for her based on, the Unplugged performance where she insisted on playing solo guitar and was not a very good guitarist. And, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Robbie Robertson thing where it's like, oh, yeah, that was all you? So when's that happening? When's that happening again? Anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's the exact same thing as the fucking band, man. You can't, if you're going to go into the studio and collaborate with people, better get the exact nature of your legality straight, because you will, something bad will happen. You will get bitten in the ass at some point. Sorry.
Well, while reading this account, I was moved to think, I've heard a lot about celebrities who reportedly demand that underlings not look them in the eye. I think Diana Ross was one that sprung to mind. And I was just thinking about this, and I did a little Googling, and there is a lot written on this subject. I was sort of shocked to find. The New York Post wrote a piece in 2011 called "Stare Wars." The ultimate star perk is forbidding eye contact. And it includes the passage, "We've all heard this for years, attached to pretty much every A-list celeb or rock star out there. Barbra Streisand forces hotel workers to turn and face the wall when she enters a room," goes one tale. Same for Michael Jordan at the Foxwoods Resort Casino. Some say Nicole Kidman insists her makeup artist refrain from making eye contact. Tom Cruise supposedly ordered extras to avert their gazes on the set of Magnolia. So I'd like to do a little sidebar on the phenomenon of celebrities allegedly saying that people can't look them in the eye, because it's fascinating to me. This same story in page 6 reports that The Smoking Gun leaked Katy Perry's tour writer for 2011, which provided, in their mind, definitive proof because of this clause covering her driver's behavior. She stipulated that her chauffeur is, quote, not to start a conversation with her or, quote, stare. And this same New York Post piece repeats a story that Jessica Alba told, I think on several occasions, about a time she had a bit role on 2 episodes of Beverly Hills 90210 back in 1998, and she was apparently contractually forbidden from making eye contact with Luke Perry or Tori Spelling. Otherwise, she would have been thrown off the set. She said you wouldn't be allowed to talk to them unless they spoke to you first. It was bizarre, but I guess that's what happens to you when you become a big star. It's like the Queen. The same piece also said that Sylvester Stallone was sued by 5 of his household staffers in 1999, complaining that they could be fired if they looked him in the eye. Apparently, when Sylvester Stallone entered a room, they were expected to, quote, back out and vanish immediately. A piece on Yahoo about this phenomenon cites an example from Boy Meets World actor Ryder Strong, who was in a 1993 movie with Donald Sutherland called Benefit of the Doubt. And apparently he was informed nobody can make eye contact with Sutherland. He talked about this on the iHeart podcast, Pod Meets World. If you were in a scene with him, you could make eye contact with him, but his whole thing was that every crew member has to look away. And the theory, I guess, behind all this is that actors are sensitive and they're getting in the zone, and any kind of eye contact is a very intimate thing and it might throw them or shake their performance. Or I'm waiting for you to make a fart sound.
I mean, dude, it's never good actors that you hear about, right? Sorry, Donald Sutherland, you're not, fucking if like Daniel Day-Lewis said it, like I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, that has credence. If like Meryl Streep said it, I'd be like, okay, sure. But it's like, oh, Donald Sutherland, do you really need the purity of your getting into character for the fucking movie you made with one of the guys from Boy Meets World, like you old asshole? Having said all of that, if I had that kind of power, I would probably do it. I want people to look. I want people to look at me in the eyes.
Yeah, makes fair.
Insects.
Where's a quick lightning round of stories about other famous, other A-listers who have been linked to this demand. Sandra Bullock. Entertainment journalist Steve Hessler claimed back in 2010, I was an extra in The Lake House when Sandra Bullock was in it, and we were told that we were not allowed to make eye contact with her unless she initiated the eye contact. But apparently the crew started this policy on her behalf, and when she found out about it, she threw a big party for the cast and crew just to show that she wasn't a terrible person.
Yeah, if somebody ruined Sandra for me, I'd be pretty broken.
Yeah. Tom Cruise, on the other hand, rumors about
killing Shelley Miscavige. Yeah. Like, what? It's astounding to me that anyone would bother cherry picking this particular weird thing about Tom Cruise out. Like, what?
Yes. He has denied them. In an interview that director Chris McQuarrie gave to the Sunday Times, he said that he asked Tom Cruise what the weirdest story was that he'd ever heard about himself, and Cruise laughed and said that it was a myth that people were not allowed to look me in the eye. So he says that's not true. Leonardo DiCaprio. The Hollywood Reporter claimed in 2019 that on the set of Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, quote, some crew members on there were instructed to avoid making eye contact with him. The qualifier of some crew members is interesting. Maybe they're people that he just specifically didn't like.
Yeah, I mean, again, Leo's not
much.
Exactly like, I don't think anyone's like expecting Leo to be like the nicest guy in Hollywood, right? Especially if you're a 26-year-old woman. Maybe that's what he meant. Maybe he meant anyone who's over the age of 26, do not look at me in the eyes. And also a dude. The rest of you, please do.
This brings us, of course, to Ellen DeGeneres. She responded to multiple reports of toxic environment on her soundstage. According to Page 6, she had a Zoom call meeting with her staff, and she addressed these reports. She said, I don't know where this rumor started that you can't look me in the eye. Please talk to me. Look me in the eye.
That is a command.
Yeah. And finally, noted a comedy hero of mine, but noted eccentric Mike Myers, a bodyguard who worked with Mike on The Love Guru, the much maligned Love Guru in 2008, has claimed that he was fired for looking Myers in the eye. He said he was informed of this policy, but accidentally made eye contact while allowing him into his trailer. And this bodyguard, I guess he took to Twitter to say, within an hour, I got a phone call letting me know that I'm fired and I have to get off the set because I broke this weird rule. Mike Myers, meanwhile, denies this claim.
That's just so fucking dumb. Like, you really needed to be in the right headspace for the Love Guru. Eye contact would have broken. Like, come on. Chud. He had to make, I guess he really had to pour it into writing the Pentaverate.
Oh my God, I forgot.
Anybody
about
remember that? Anybody remember? Like, what was that, 2 summers ago? A summer ago? Who knows? Doesn't matter. God, these people. The least they can do is something interesting like Lauryn Hill and just say, I'm not paying taxes anymore because of society. So pedestrian and boring eye contact. All right, enough of that ugly stuff. What about the songs? A couple of them were pretty good, I'm told. D'Angelo came by to sing on Nothing Even Matters. He told Rolling Stone, originally we were going to swap tunes for each other's projects because I was working on Voodoo at the same time, and my keyboardist, James Poyser, of the aforementioned out-of-tune harpsichord, was working with her. When Lauryn and I went into the studio together, I laid down my vocals in the course of an hour. I don't know why he felt compelled to add that, but sure. And then this was actually interesting to me. He said churches started substituting God in for the lyrics to Nothing Else Matters. And he was like, whenever they make a gospel version out of a secular song, that's significant.
Wow. Yeah. I'm having a tough time thinking of another example. Maybe I Shall Be Released.
I mean, neither of us go to like Black Baptist churches, so probably there are others. But yeah, I Shall Be Released has been adopted.
Meanwhile, on Everything Is Everything, future R&B star John Legend showed up. I did not know this.
Yep.
Said, I was in the spring of my junior year at the University of Pennsylvania. He's talking to Rolling Stone. A friend invited me to give her a ride to Lauryn's house in Jersey. Lauryn was working on Everything Is Everything. I sang and played a couple songs for her, and she asked me to play piano on the track. She guided me a little bit, but it was pretty simple because I was playing along with a string part that was already there. So I became known around campus as the dude who played on Everything Is Everything. It was my little claim to fame at Penn for my whole senior year. That's cool. You know what's less cool? Carlos Santana.
Yes, now canceled transphobic boomer guitar wank icon Carlos Santana, a man who never met somebody else's song he couldn't play the same licks over. Plays on To Zion, the most personal of the tracks, addressed to Lauryn Hill's son with Marley. I f***ing hate Carlos Santana. I always have.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah. I just watched, so he was like a talking head that I was exposed to a lot when I was watching a bunch of like music documentaries, and he just had nothing profound to say ever. And it clearly was a guy who thought he did, you know, and had a lot of like the f***ing trans rant he just went on, like, who the f*** asked you? Get up there, play that shitty f***ing lick, and go wherever it is you go, you know? What a prick.
Can you hum the Santana guitar lick? Is it like the same lick over and over? You have it more.
No. I'm just thinking of now I'm just thinking of the smooth lick. But he has a very identifiable style. I mean, and some of it is, I don't know. It's just sounds like Guitar Center. That fucking shitty tone, like out of time. Just like sour bends. His bends are out of tune. Yeah, that guy.
I've interviewed him a few times, and he's a tough interview.
Were you being insufficiently deferential?
No, it was like nailing Jell-O to the wall. It was just everything you said was so conceptual that there was nothing to grab onto. So there was no follow-ups. There was everything would just drift off until like, oh, wow. That's really, wow. That's really.
Yeah. Where'd you get that leather fedora? So anyway, he plays on To Zion because Hill promised to be on Supernatural, and in fact she was, although not one of the songs that album is remembered for. She apparently was a big fan of his going way back. She said, told MTV News in 1999, I used to write music, write songs over Santana's guitar playing when I was a little kid. I had all his records, and I would play Samba Pati off the Abraxas album and just write rhymes and songs on top of it. So I knew Carlos way before he knew me. That song, Hill told The Guardian in 1999, is about the revelation that my son was to me. I had always made decisions for other people, making everybody else happy. And once I had him, that was really the first decision that was unpopular. It was one that was based on my happiness and not what other people wanted for me or for themselves. And it was the best decision I could have made because I'm the happiest and healthiest that I have ever been. We like to hear that.
Yeah. For the album smash hit, Doo-wop, parentheses, that thing, close parentheses, Anisha Randolph, a backup singer on the track, told Rolling Stone that, quote, I got a phone call asking if I was available to come to Chungking Studios. Lauryn came in eating spaghetti pomodoro and garlic bread. For some reason, I really want to know if she was like walking in with that and eating it as she was walking, or if she came in eating,
I just like the fact that this person remembers that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's like pretty. I'm trying to think if I have any celebrity experiences where they were eating and I'm remembering what they were eating. No. Okay. Moving on. Lauryn explained where she's trying to go with this album. For doo-wop, she said, I want to play with 50s and 60s harmonies, like barbershop guys on the corner. And then we all just jumped in and harmonizing a cappella, woo, woo, woo. I should have given that more passion. Commissioner Gordon added, when I mixed doo-wop at Sony Studios, it was 128 tracks, 248 machines plus two 24 2-inch machines all running at the same time. I know there are a lot of vocal harmonies on that track. I know that. And I'm sure there are a lot of samples running at the same time. I'm sure there are a lot of drums that are individually mic'd and have their own track. How are there 128 tracks on that song?
I mean, Everything you just said.
Yeah, I mean, but Jesus.
Her vocals are probably tracked over a few times.
Yeah.
Everybody, I mean, they might have done the Queen thing, you know, where everybody's harmonies are tracked over multiple times. Yeah, I mean, that stuff piles up quickly. It's crazy. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can, there's like prog rock wonks who put like 50 mics on a drum kit, you know? Yeah. Some of the lyrics in doo-wop, though, haven't aged particularly well. In an era that's much more sex positive, Hill's moralistic stance can seem a little bit judgy. But in a Details interview at the time, she skirted around whether or not she was taking aim at some of her peers. I mean, to contextualize all of this, this is, you know, an era in which like Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown are rapping about sex in a very aggressive, female-centered way. And doo-wop, that thing is... Lauryn was, her image was not at all sexual, and this song in particular has a few different
Sister
lines.
Act 2.
What's that?
I mean, her part in Sister Act 2, where she was, you know, I mean, she's singing in a choir.
In a nunnery.
No, excuse me.
Or no, she's one of the teen kids. I forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been 3 weeks since you were looking for your friend, the one you let hit it and never called again. You act like you ain't hear him, then give him a little trim. To begin, how you think you're really gonna pretend like you wasn't down and you called him again? Plus, when you give it up so easy, you ain't even fooling him. If he did it then you'd probably again.
Trim is such like a Rat Pack expression.
Yeah. Who you gonna tell when the repercussions spin? Showing off your ass because you're thinking it's a trend. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, she said she wasn't taking aim at them in particular. She said, I'm not dissing them. I'm dissing their mindset. My music talks about a certain way of thinking, and if the cap fits, you know? I knew girls like Kim growing up. I might have even been one at a certain age. And there's a huge lack of self-esteem behind that thinking. I don't think Lil' Kim's problem is a lack of self-esteem.
No. To quote Lil' Kim around this period, I used to be scared of the dick. Now I throw lips to the Thank you.
There you have it.
Yes.
As true today as when it was written.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
The album's cover of Frankie Valli's hit Can't Take My Eyes Off You was actually never meant to be a commercial single. It was recorded for the very forgettable Mel Gibson-Julia Roberts movie Conspiracy Theory. But once it hit the radio, it became immensely popular and wound up as a bonus track on the record. I would imagine this would have been around the time of its resurgence in 10 Things I Hate About You. Maybe that was 99. That might have been 99.
Yeah, it was 99.
I don't know which came first, yeah.
Good couple of years for Frankie.
Yeah.
Royalty checks
Yeah,
must have been fat.
And then he got Jersey Boys premiered probably around then too. Jeez, living large. Commissioner Gordon told Rolling Stone, Lauryn called me and said she was behind and had to get the song done. She didn't know how the arrangement of the song went, so he went and got a copy from Coconuts or Sam Goody record stores. I had a little one-room 16-track studio in my apartment in Jersey. Lauryn was 8 months pregnant, laying on her back on the floor, half asleep, holding a handheld mic. She did all those vocals off the top of her head, pretty much in one take, with the beatbox and all that. That blew me away. That is a great version of that song. I love that song.
The album, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, the album is in conversation with a history of a wide swath of black music. Hill and Mary J. Blige's duet, I Used to Love Him, samples a hook from Ice Cream, which was a Wu-Tang member Raekwon's solo track. The album's title track, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, also calls back to another 90s rap star. It's a play on Common's 1994 song, I Used to Love Her. Her is an acronym for Hip-Hop in its Essence is Real, which has always felt like a stretch to me, Common. Hill also nods at a foundational classic from the dance music genre on the album, which he says, Jack Your Body. In Every Ghetto, Every City, she's referencing the 1986 club anthem, Jack Your Body, by Chicago DJ producer Steve Silk Hurley. And Lost Ones is built on a sample of the famous dancehall track Bam Bam by Sister Nancy, which itself interpolates a hook from the 1966 Toots and the Maytals song of the same name. That's just so cool, man. I love it's like the old folk songs or like old blues songs that just have like a bunch of common lyrics. Everything's just kind of shared and passed around. Funnily enough, the teacher who's heard talking with students on Miseducation's interludes is Ras Baraka, who is now the longtime mayor of Newark. He is the son of Amiri Baraka, who is a writer, very foundational jazz writer, music writer, who wrote a lot of his stuff under the name Leroy Jones. He said, I was running for councilman in Newark, and I was also an 8th grade teacher. I was just about to take 2 of my students home, and Lauryn called and asked if I could come up to her house in South Orange. There were chairs set up in the living room, and a bunch of kids were there. She told me she wanted to discuss the concept of love. There was a blackboard, and I wrote the letters love, and we just went into the whole discussion. So for the album's title, Hill reached back to a 1933 book called The Miseducation of the Negro by Dr. Carter G. Woodson that her parents had a copy of. And in the book, Woodson railed against what he saw was cultural indoctrination by the U.S. school system against black students, writing at one point, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him to stand here or go yonder. He will find his, quote, proper place and will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. The title is also a reference to a 1974 blaxploitation film called The Education of Sonny Carson. Carson was a real-life figure. He was a Korean War vet, activist, community leader in Brooklyn who organized protests of the school systems in black communities in New York in the 1960s. And that film has become a huge touchstone in hip-hop. The Wu-Tang Clan, Prodigy of Mobb Deep, Common, Ghostface Killah, Pete Rock, 2 Chainz, and Meek Mill, among others, have all sampled dialogue from the film in their music, and 21 Savage and Travis Scott both sampled a song from the film's soundtrack to use as the basis for their tracks.
Lauryn Hill told The Guardian, the title of the album was meant to discuss those life lessons, those things you don't get in any textbook, things that we go through that force us to mature. Hopefully we learn. Some people get stuck. They say that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And these are some really powerful lessons that changed the course and direction of my life. And for the cover of the album, so beloved by my dear friend Alex Heigl, Lauryn Hill initially pursued a school-themed art direction at her old high school in New Jersey, shot by a guy named Eric Johnson, who'd actually grown up in South Orange also. But after these images had been shot, Aaron Garotzia, then Sony Music's art director, got a phone call from Lauryn Hill's team, he recalled to OK Player. An image of Eric's was selected that would be carved, in quotes, from the wood of the desk. I provided direction to Will Kennedy, a gifted retoucher that was part of the art department. In 1998, Photoshop wasn't anywhere near as powerful. Retouchers made up for it with all their skills and talent. Will had a knack for getting the art to look just right. There had been various versions of the cover art, including some with the wood chips that had just been carved out, if you will, and visible on the surface of the desk. That got rejected as the various wood chips were visually distracting. Then there was another version that had no pencil. But in the end, the cleaner desk was finally selected.
Yeah, it always reminded me of the Burnin', the Wailers album cover, which I think in that interview, that OK Player interview, there's a different executive who's like, yeah, they didn't want the Bob Marley album cover, which means more than one person made that same mistake. It also made me think of the Alice Cooper, the School's Out.
School's Out.
Which
Yeah.
I doubt was an influence. I'm just going to go on a limb there. Despite the album's status in this day and age, there was internal friction about it at the time. Rohan Marley told Rolling Stone, Lauryn and her mom took early versions of the album to Sony Records, and they said, this is coffee table music. What is this? She took her and walked out of there. Rich Nice, A&R at Columbia, told OK Player, the buzz on the album in the building wasn't as popular as you might think, and her being a black woman added touchiness to it. There was a who does she think she is in the building. The climate from some senior execs was that they were not in favor of the record, and it was no secret to the people who created and worked on it. It was insulting that this great artist put together this amazing album, but all they want is a jukebox artist. Somebody actually said, To Zion is okay, but there's no Killing Me Softly here.
However, the label was able to get a lot of press in order for Lauryn. She was on the cover of Time magazine's tribute to hip-hop's 20th anniversary, which I guess they're counting as 1978, which is weird because now we've got a big 50th anniversary of hip-hop. Anyway.
What is Time?
Yeah, true. It's a flat circle. And they also scored covers to not just more black-focused magazines like Honey, Essence, Vibe, and The Source, but also Harper's Bazaar, GQ, and Rolling Stone. Stephanie Gale, the senior director of marketing at Columbia at the time, told OK Player, the biggest issue at the time seems silly now, but the label was concerned about how people would react to her being pregnant. I needed to make sure we could accomplish everything that was needed to properly set up an album without making it obvious that she was with child. We pushed to get the album photo shoot done as soon as we could deliver the iconic concept she was insisting on, and used great discretion to get the Doo-Wop That Thing video completed. Now, Heigl, tell us about this video for Doo-Wop That Thing, because we were talking before we started recording. I don't think I've ever seen this video, which is one of my many cultural blind spots from the era in which I allegedly grew up.
Yeah. For any of you who are similarly in a blind spot, it is a split screen setup with Lauryn in the current day, and then as a kind of very obviously Motown influenced singer. And it kind of pans around the streets of Harlem, and everybody's dressed currently and then dressed from the 60s. Very vibey, very cool. The senior director of video production for Columbia at the time, Camille Yorick, told OK Player that she reached out to a bunch of directors, and it was actually a British production duo named Big TV who submitted the split screen idea. They flew to New York in advance of this shoot, and we had a great meeting with Lauryn at her hotel. It was Lauryn's decision to make the split screen invisible. She liked that one image blended into the other, as opposed to a stark line. What else has Big TV done? That's not really Googleable. Just brings up Best Buy. Big TV. Anyway, York continued, the styling, photography, and production design were also key to the magic of that video. The challenge? We were basically shooting 2 videos at once. It was a 5-day shoot, 2 sets of wardrobes, and art direction from 2 very different time periods, requiring lots of research. We shot the whole thing in the Inwood section of Uptown Manhattan. We took over a city block for 5 days. Lauryn was also very pregnant at the time, but she was a trooper. It paid off at the MTV VMAs, back when that meant something. Doo-Wop's video won 4 awards for Best Female Video, Best R&B Video, Best Art Direction, and Video of the Year, making Heigl the first solo black artist to win, and the second overall after TLC in 1995, because MTV didn't like black people.
The song Lost Ones was leaked early, and with it being a presumed shot at Wyclef, radio stations ate it up, causing a wave of hype around the album. Consequently, when the full record dropped on August 25th, 1998, it debuted atop the Billboard 200, making Lauryn Hill the first unaccompanied female solo rapper to do so. And she's still one of only 5 female rappers to hold the honor, with the other 4 being Foxy Brown, yes, Eve, yes, Nicki Minaj, sure, Cardi B, How do you feel about that?
That's fine.
Okay. During its first week on the shelves, Miseducation sold over 420,000 copies, breaking the record for the release week sales by any female artist. Wow.
That stood until Adele's 25.
Jesus, not 21, 25.
Yeah.
Wow. That is crazy. The Recording Industry Association of America certified the album gold a little more than a month after it came out, which is a sales of 500,000 copies or more, and the record spent 81 total weeks in the Billboard 200. In 2021, the Guinness Book of World Records noted that Lauryn Hill became the first female rapper to reach RIAA Diamond certification for selling 10 million copies of Miseducation. Not only has no other female rapper achieved the feat since, but the only rappers, period, to reach diamond status for an album are Eminem, Outkast, Notorious B.I.G., presumably not in his lifetime, Tupac, presumably not in his lifetime, Beastie Boys, and MC Hammer. What was Beastie Boy? Licensed to Ill? Must have been Licensed to Ill.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been Paul's Boutique. Okay. Wow.
Miseducation was intended to function as a full album, and consequently, at first, Doo-Wop wasn't even going to come out as a commercial single. But the album was such a success that Columbia printed up a limited number of singles for the song and released them 2 months after the album dropped. That's just wild to me. In October of 1998, they weren't going to release it. Album was such a success that they were like, 2 months later, they were like, I guess we gotta do this. The single debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and Hot Rap Songs chart, became Hill's only top 10 hit. 2 other singles from Miseducation charted, X Factor at number 21 and Everything is Everything at number 35. And then at the Grammys the following year, Heigl set 2 additional records for female artists. She received 10 nominations and won 5 awards, the first female artist to do so, with Miseducation becoming the first hip-hop record to win Album of the Year.
Wow.
And then the music goes into a minor key. because all of this came at a price. Hill's manager at the time, Jason Jackson, told Rolling Stone, Lauryn became an international superstar. She couldn't go to the grocery store without makeup, and I think that had an adverse effect on her. 2003 Rolling Stone article by Torre contended that Hill was offered the role of Charlie's Angels that ultimately went to Lucy Liu, and that she took meetings with Matt Damon about being in The Bourne Identity, Brad Pitt about a part in The Mexican, and with the Wachowskis about a role in the last two films in the Matrix trilogy, which I am betting dollars to donuts is the role that ultimately went to Jada Pinkett Smith.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow.
That is crazy.
Did she do any big movies after? No, I assume not. Yeah. Nope. Lauryn Hill told Rolling Stone, there were definitely things I enjoyed about stardom, but there were definitely things I didn't enjoy. The pedestal, to me, is as much about containment and control as it is adulation. Finding balance, clarity, and sobriety can be very hard for some to maintain. She added, the idea of artists as public property, I always had a problem with that. I agreed to share my art. I'm not agreeing to necessarily share myself. The entitlement that people often feel, like they somehow own you or own a piece of you, can be incredibly dangerous. I chafe under any kind of control like that and resist expectations that suggest I should somehow dumb down and be predictable to make people feel comfortable rather than authentically express myself. So Lauryn withdrew into her family life and went deeper into religion. Jason Jackson, her manager, told Rolling Stone, it started to get strange. Bible study went from 1 day a week to 3 days a week to 5 days a week. I went to a couple of them, but was like, I completely understand if it's your calling, but it's not mine and I can't force it. As that picked up, we drifted further and further.
Again, hard to know what actually happened, but we do have, I mean, what hard to know what actually happened, but what seemed to happen was a guy named Brother Anthony came in 2000. He sort of a Bible-centric spiritual advisor, and possibly under his influence, Hill fired her management team and other people close to her with no notice. Sources told Rolling Stone that she began starting many of her sentences with, Brother Anthony says. People couldn't pin down what exactly it was that he believed in other than the Bible. One person told Rolling Stone, I don't think he had a religion. I think he was more like, my interpretation of the Bible is the only interpretation of the Bible. I'm the only one on earth that knows the truth. Shortly after recording her disastrous installment of MTV Unplugged, Hill told MTV Online, I met someone who has an understanding of the Bible like no one else I ever met in my life. I just sat at his feet and ingested pure scripture for about a year. Pras Michel, never one to mince words, said, Brother Anthony was definitely on some other shit. I had a tape of his teachings. That shit is ill. F me up. I can't explain it. It was some weird shit, man. It was some real cult shit. So, MTV Unplugged 2.0, which is her only album-length proper release, comes out, and it was it was a something. It was quite a thing. She didn't have any full band arrangements. It was just her and an acoustic guitar, which she did appear to not to have spent a ton of time practicing. And the entire album is punctuated by a lot of just raw emotion. She breaks down in tears repeatedly. She makes statements like, I'm crazy and deranged. I'm emotionally unstable. I used to be a performer, but I don't really consider myself a performer anymore. She said, I created this public persona, this public illusion, and it held me hostage. I couldn't be a real person because you're too afraid of what your public will say. At that point, I had to do some dying.
Wow.
Yeah, there's the do you remember this?
I dimly.
Yeah. They recorded it on July 21st, 2001. It did get a sample it became the basis for Kanye's song All Falls Down, one of the songs off of it, so it had that. But of course, now it's all just being, reappraised. Sam Smith tweeted that MTV Unplugged Lauryn Hill's is their Bible. Britney Spears praised the album as amazing.
I mean, I'm sure the performances were great, but it must have just been a troubling document of an artist in some form of what I'll tentatively say collapse. And I'm saying that as somebody who doesn't really know the intricacies of her personal life. But yeah, it doesn't sound like an especially healthy place. And she elaborated on this a little bit in a 2006 interview with Essence. She said, I had to step away when I realized that for the sake of the machine, I was being way too compromised. I had to fight for an identity that doesn't fit in one of those boxes. I'm a whole woman. And when I can't be whole, I have a problem. And by the end, I was like, I've got to get out of here. People need to understand that the Lauryn Hill they were exposed to in the beginning was all that was allowed in that arena at that time. There was much more strength, spirit, passion, desire, curiosity, ambition, and opinion that was not allowed in a small space designated for consumer mass appeal and dictated by very limited standards. It's a very articulate way to, I mean, I assume this would be in our email interview phase, but it's a very articulate way to put feeling at odds with the machine.
Yeah, I mean, again, everything she says is like...
It's not wrong.
Yeah, it's not wrong. It's just, not how, unfortunately, not the way that the system works. Torre's 2003 feature in Rolling Stone had some sources claiming that Columbia had spent over $2.5 million on a follow-up to Miseducation by that point, and that they had subsequently cut her off. Her live shows around this time gained a reputation for starting hours late, if at all. Performances were frequently canceled. In December of 2003, during a performance in Vatican City, she spoke of the corruption, exploitation, and abuses by the Catholic Church, which, again, not wrong.
Sure, yeah.
Read the room.
Very Sinead-like.
Yeah. But again, in Vatican City, which is arguably like the most punk thing that you could possibly do. But,
oh, yes, totally.
But like, yeah, I don't know how she thought that would go for her. Fugees reunited in 2004 for Dave Chappelle's Block Party. And she has released new music. She's become, just more and more of a recluse. I found this delightful note in Wikipedia. One of the few public appearances Hill made in 2008 was at a Martha Stewart book signing in New Jersey.
A fellow inmate.
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
Speaking of tax evasion, then, of course, there was the tax evasion. In June of 2012, Hill was charged with 3 counts of tax fraud for failing to file taxes on $1.8 million of income earned between 2005 and 2007. In a long screed on her Tumblr account, Hill said that she had gone underground as a result of, quote, a climate of hostility, false entitlement, manipulation, racial prejudice, sexism, and ageism, going on to state, when I was working consistently without being affected by the interferences mentioned above, I filed and paid my taxes. This only stopped when it was necessary to withdraw from society in order to guarantee the safety and well-being of myself and my family. Which, again, makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
Not a thing you can do, though.
She's a brilliant woman. I mean, everything we discussed earlier about, writing songs for Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston at age 20 and going to Columbia and being homecoming queen and...
An athlete.
I guess... Oh, and yes, athlete. I mean, and also an incredible actress too.
Yeah.
I would assume that people who are that brilliant maybe assume the rules don't apply to them, or that the only way to change things in society is not to comply.
Well, the government was of a different mind, and she served just under 3 months in the minimum security federal prison in Danbury, Connecticut. In 2021, Hill made the claim on a podcast that her label never asked how they could help her make another album, which is a commonly aggregated news piece, despite all of that stuff that I said about Torre's feature claiming Columbia spent $2.5 million on her. I have to believe that that was not true. Like, far be it for me to call Lauryn Hill a liar, but I don't think there's any way that that's a true thing. Yeah, a source described the label to him as bending over backwards for her. But the fact of the matter is that other than if you're counting Unplugged, Hill has never given a proper full-length album follow-up to this. The big news this month is that she announced a 25th anniversary tour to commemorate Miseducation, and all the obvious jokes about whether or not it'll start on time or if a new record will be timed to the album's 50th anniversary have been made. So, thank you. That contest is now closed.
Thank you to everyone who wrote in.
Yes. I think the thing that makes me saddest about this is just the potential. I was reading a lot of interviews from artists like also now canceled, Lizzo, but just a lot of the young hip hop adjacent or R&B adjacent artists who talked about how truly crazy it was to see someone like her have such a level of visibility and just world domination when they were growing up, you know. And one of the things we didn't mention at one point was that she had a tour that was like co-sponsored by Levi's, like, you know, the jeans. That was a big deal. Like, it was a big fashion coup, and getting on the cover of like Harper's Bazaar and Time magazine, like that was really genuinely crazy shit, you know, for a black woman at the time, especially in that era of hip hop. So that's what just makes me sad about this is, like, you know, there was seemingly such a long on-road ahead of her, and it just never materialized. She took the off-ramp instead. You know, and being is that she hasn't talked about it a ton, you know, you can't really, we can only take her at her word that it was the right move for her and her family, but it's still, yeah, it's just like seeing that idea of that potential never really materialize is really heartbreaking. What a bummer.
Yes, but it almost gets back to the old, is it better to have loved and lost than never loved
Sure.
at all?
Yeah. You know, we still have the album, man. It still sold 10 million copies. You know, you can't take that away from her. She broke all those records. She was, and even if she never lived up to the potential of being that figurehead and that person for the hip hop community, she was still out there for a lot of kids growing up who needed to see that. And that's what's ultimately still really important and what we can take away from it. And hey, you know, if you get tickets, I really hope the show starts on time. I'm Alex Heigl. This has been Too Much Information. Thank you for listening.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeart Radio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.